Welcome everybody tonight. Tonight we have Coach Cottle. He's going to be on the opposite end instead of introducing the speaker for the night. We are fortunate enough to have Coach Cottle talk to us tonight. Idea is for him to go over making runs to create space. It's a practice he actually just ran some ODP girls here, so we're very fortunate to have Coach Cottle. Coach Cottle, I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, thank you very much, Fred. Hey, one thing I want to do is before we start getting in, promote everybody panelists, and I'll try to keep up with that as well. But part of the deal is that I believe this got to be an interactive a lesson. I don't really want to just talk away. So if you have questions at any point, feel free to unmute yourself, or if you have a point you'd like to make as well. During the run of this thing, I encourage you to do so, because I feel like the only way we're going to get better is by helping each other out. So by all means, I'm going to share what I've got, but I want to encourage you to share your ideas as well as we go through. All right, so I'm going to go and share the PowerPoint out. All right, can you see it okay? All right, so I'm going to give you a little backstory on the PowerPoint. I had to pick Liverpool, and it's kind of wild. I've got my assistant coach at Colleyville Heritage. He's a huge Liverpool fan, so I was talking smack and all kinds of stuff, and ended up watching one of the games with him one day and realized a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about in this, they were actually doing. And so basically what it is that, I don't know, you guys have all had players, we talk about them all the time. Sometimes we're going to make a run, never expecting to get the ball, right? We're going to make runs to create space or open things up or open ideas. And that's kind of what this is about. Now, when you watch Liverpool, and I encourage you to do so, don't watch the ball, watch all the players and the movement off the ball. And that's going to kind of give you an idea what we're looking for. So the beauty of it is that, for example, a forward running across the back line has a tendency to pull 2 or 3 defenders if they do it correctly, which allows a hole or a space for somebody else to play into. And that's kind of what the ideas development or the ideas that this practice is trying to develop. And there's going to be key parts of it that make it work. Okay, so first thing, we've all seen this before. And so I know when I gave it to Chris Bryant, an old friend of mine, a coach out at Midland Lee, has joined us tonight. He said, hey, we've done this a lot because we did the soccer's the PDL team together, and we've done a lot of these things. But, you know, a lot of things you'll find that not every activity, you know, you can use it for different ideas and different thoughts. And so what I'll do is I'll start off with 2 grids side by side, and we'll have 2 different teams. And in the beginning, we're going to work on just ideas of movement and eyes up, different technical things that they're going to need in order to make the session successful. I've gotten away from doing any kind of cones or lines or anything like that, and I want the players to get to playing as fast as possible. And I'll kind of give you the idea behind it, and then we'll do a little motion with it too. But basically it starts off, and can you see my cursor? So when the cursor goes, so we're starting out with four people, and I tell the 4 players, so for example, this guy, his job is to stand on this line over here. Now let me back it up. This guy runs this line here, this guy runs this line, this guy runs this line. And so when the ball is passed, like you can see right here, when the ball is passed here, each of these players form a right, left, and a far away. And so I tell them, you know, to keep it as simple as possible. And this is not, you know, US soccer lingo or anything like that. It's just something, try to make it as simple as possible. So whether we're talking the PDL guys, or whether we're talking a 4-year-old soccer team or my high school guys, or the ODP girls today, we're using the same terminology. All right, so right, left, far away. So whenever a player with the ball, anytime it moves, there's always a right, left, far away option. And it constantly moves, right? Now, while this blue team's group's doing it, this team's doing it here. Now there's coaching points that I try to get them in. And this is the first thing. In fact, tonight was a prime example of it. For us to have our players understand, you know, the movement off the ball, to see the things that are created, right? They've got to have their eyes up. And so it's wild because we did it with the girls tonight. But if you'll watch the group, and then if you put them in this box, you'll see it happen too. And like I said, jump in anytime if you have something to add to it. But it's almost like this ball right here is a rabbit and their dogs, right? And all they do is they watch that ball. And you can watch their heads, and as the ball's passed around to each kid, the only thing that they're staring at is the ball. And so a lot of times when you do games or practice or stuff like that, and they all start going tight together and you say spread out, I'll guarantee 90% of the problem is they're looking at the ball, and your mind and your body automatically follows what you look at. And so they'll tighten up. And so the first part of this thing, I say, okay, here's the deal. Whenever the ball is passed, and there's got to be, let me see if I can back this up. There we go. Oops, too much. So whenever this first pass is made right there, this person's job is to look at all 3 other options. as this ball goes from here to here, I tell this person to anticipate what's going to happen. So in case the ball travels to him, where are the other options? So their eyes are always looking up and scanning. They can't stare at the ball. They got to move. In fact, Gary made a good point tonight. He said, whenever you watch this thing, you ought to see ponytails flopping, right? And if you see ponytails flopping with the girls, then you obviously know that they're looking around and not just shaking their heads, but actually looking in. That's the key. Without that one part, none of this stuff works, right? And he also brought up a good point too. He said they did a study on Indianesta. In one game, his head moved 400 times. Now, I wonder who had the job to count that out, and Lord knows if it's fact or not. But the fact is, if you think of like a player for Spain, you know, Indianesta, that guy was amazing. Saw all kinds of things, created a lot, but it's constantly scanning, constantly looking, constantly thinking, and never stared at the ball. The next thing is their hips, right? And I tried to find a way to make it work here where I could move the hips, but it didn't work out so well. But their hips have to face the whole field. All right, so how many times would you have this player, for example, where their body shape faces directly back to the ball? And so we talked to them also at this time. Say, look, if I'm facing you, the only way I can play is you fast. I can't open up, I can't play anything else. But if my body shape faces you, the only way I can play you is quickly. So what I tell them is that hips open to the field. You got to make sure that all three other options are within your hips or your field of vision so you can play quicker, all right? Because if you face one direction, that's the only way you can play quick. Okay, keep moving. All right, that's the next part, because they'll stand there and they'll follow a ball. In fact, it's wild. I guarantee if you try this out, the ball will start doing this little circle thing, and they'll just go around in a circle like cattle. And it's the craziest thing. So no, make options, think different things, keep moving, keep a shape. And so to kind of play this through again, as the ball travels, it's that constant movement we're looking for. Okay, and then the player with the ball, I tell them is that anytime she's got the ball, then she has to have a right, left, and far away option, no matter what. So anytime that ball moves, we have to reset our hips, reset our ideas, and reset our movement. Okay, the couple of things I add to it as they get better at it, and I wouldn't do all this in one session, right? I wouldn't put all these things. It takes time to develop this, but I say overstrike the passes, right? Because there's a lot of times when the ball goes slow, especially when they're starting off, it's going to have to slow down a bit until they get used to getting their head up. But then I tell them to overstrike everything. And this, especially with my high school guys, we're constantly doing that, because if you know, and you guys know as well as I do, every level jump, every time you go up a little bit higher, so whether it be from the, you know, say a club level to a high level high school, or high level high school to college, or collegiate to pro, and on up the level, the one thing that changes is the speed of the ball and the speed of the way things happen. And that's truth. So if you look at like my session or your session, I'll promise you, you'll go to college and you'll see the exact same session. Right? You'll see, you go to pros and you're going to see the same session. It doesn't matter what level people are on. They all run the same sessions. What changes is the decision making of the players and the speed of the ball. And so if you emphasize that, strike the ball harder, hit it harder. And one kid one time said, well, coach, you know, if I hit it too hard, then he can't receive it. And I always say, well, you know, that's his fault. He's got to learn. He's got to learn how to receive that ball. If we're going to pick up the pace, if we're going to move it like we should, the ball has to pick up and has to go faster. Next thing, another option I put in at times is say make it all mandatory two touch. All right, so now you receive a ball, that first touch has to go to your second touch, you know, into the direction of the next pass. But that's little pieces that we add on as we progress up and go on. I said I would not do all this in one session. This is just over time, just little things to hound on. So it may be the first time you get the eyes, right, and the hips. Eyes, hips, and ideas is the first one every time it should come through. Then maybe it's hit the ball harder. Then maybe it's overstrike the ball. Maybe it's two touches that time, but you do it in different rounds. And once again, if you'll notice, there's nobody standing, nothing static. There's not a cone. It's passing, it's playing, and the kids are seeing what they'll see. Okay. Now the next progression we go on to is that now I got to figure out a way. And in fact, I'm going to back up a bit. When I threw this in with the girls tonight, because it's the first time we'd ever done it with them, it was incredible because the idea of getting their eyes off the ball changed, and it's something I hadn't thought about. But here's what I told them. Okay, so we're starting to create runs or make runs to create holes in spaces. So what'll happen is as soon as I pass the ball, or the girl passes the ball, or the guy passes the ball, then he's going to move somewhere else. So he takes off across the grid. Well, if you notice, what that automatically leaves a hole. Now, the rule was that anytime a player has the ball, they got to have a right, left, and far away option, right? So as soon as she jets across the grid, a hole is created. So we have to recognize then that you got to fill that gap, and you keep it going. The thing that they found out when we started playing with the girls, and they started doing it right, and we had a defender, it is so hard to defend because there's too many things happening. There's too many inputs for a defender to try to figure out what's going on because it's that constant movement off the ball. And then once again, they're going to get the right, left, far away, and they just keep the shape. Now, if you'll notice, this group is doing it, and then the red group is going to be doing the same exact thing, right? Developing their ideas. And so those are the same things that we're looking at. So once you pass the ball and kind of go back through it, you move out, you create a hole, then another player has to fill the hole, right? We're back to hip size and ideas, right? Keep your eyes up, read the runs of others, and keep in shape. And you'll find out that in order for this to work, they have to look around and they have to read the runs, and they start seeing it, and it happens a lot, happens fast. Now, one thing I did throw in here, this gets boring pretty quick, right? And so maybe 5 to 10 minutes max without a defender. And that's why I say this is a progression over many days. This is not a one-day thing. This is over a week or 2 weeks or whatever. And it's not an everyday thing because it gets monotonous too. And so what we'll do is we'll put it in, and then we put this idea in. Then it's 5 to 10 minutes because in the end of the day, you need to add the next person, which is that defender, to make it work. And that's what we have here. And so now we add this defender in. That makes it work because you'll find out that they find by moving off the ball that it's harder for the defender to read it. Now, I don't know if you guys have seen this before. We use this a lot. But if you notice, I've got my defender here, and on the other side, there's 3 defenders waiting, okay, which end up being attackers. If the girl in the red gets it, she's going to play it across to her teammates, or to the guys in the high school boys, and they play it across to the teammates, and then a blue player joins in. And now it becomes 4v1 versus the blues trying to win the ball back in. So it turns into a transition game. The thing is, tonight with the girls that I had, it took all about 2 minutes to realize that one defender wasn't enough because this poor girl just got slaughtered. And I said, okay, well, what do you think? How does it feel when they started playing off and running off each other? And he goes, this sucks, coach. And so I said, okay, let's add another defender. Let's make it work. And so we did another thing I'll talk about here in a minute. But this is what it ends up looking like. So the ball goes across the field. Remember from the previous session, she's got to jet out of a space. So if you imagine in a real game, when she cuts in front of the face of this girl to that defender, what's this girl going to do? She's going to follow that ball in, right? Then we get the right, left, far away, fill the hole. And now we have this girl running rampant right here. And it's hard to follow because everything's moving. But it's a constant movement. Once again, if this one gets it, then they play it across, and then they've got the same thing over here. Then it becomes 4v1 on the red side. Okay, so things that a couple adjustments that I make, it would be like I said, add the defender. It got to where they were smoking 2 pretty bad, and so we'd add a third. Then it got to the point where I said, okay, well, here's the deal. If I've got these 2 sides, we send one girl in, and then the next defender comes in. I say, okay, well, count 5 Mississippi. At 5 Mississippi, we send another defender. Another 5 Mississippi, we add the 3rd defender. Another 5 Mississippi, we add the 4th defender. And if you can possess the ball for 4 passes in that zone, with all 4 defenders in there, then they owe you 3 I'm not worthy push-ups. Basically, you get the feet of another girl or another guy, and you do 3 push-ups saying I'm not worthy to them for all 3. And they think that's pretty funny. But that's kind of the different things we had. I'm going to pause right here to see, does anybody have anything to add or any questions that you guys have before I go to the next part of the session? Like I said, it's not math class. Please, this is, I don't want to coach to Chris Bryant's name right here or Michael Keel's HS Soccer or Jacob Hoover's picture because it's just like school. So if you have something or a comment or something to add, please do so now. And like I said, I encourage you to do so. Feedback is huge.
We do have one more attendee we need to bring in, Roman, but other than that, that's all I got.
Okay, well, that wasn't a question, but we'll take it. I've got it. Let me see if what I may do. Go ahead, Daniel.
Okay, so let's say how would if the red team wins the ball, do they send it to the red side and they continue on? How would you break that up?
Correct. That's exactly what happens. And that's why I have them set side by side. And so when the red player gets it, they play it across to the other red side. So these guys would be over here. Once he plays it across, he joins it, making the 4, right? And then one blue player now joins in. So now on this side, you've got 4v1 against blue. And so it's almost a transition type game. And a couple things to add in. If the blue kicks it out of bounds, or if this defender got the ball and kick it out of bounds, well, in a real game, blue gets the ball back, right? So I keep the same rule. So in order for the red team to get it, they've got to win the ball, play it over to their side, then it gets them 4v1 in attack. Does that answer your question?
Oh, yes, sir. Thank you.
No, it's good. That's a great question. You know, like I said, it's transition. It goes fast. It moves fast, and the kids seem to like it. And we play this a ton. Any other questions? Because that was awesome, Daniel. Thank you very much, by the way. Feedback is always huge. Anybody else, any points or any thoughts?
Yeah, Warren, question I had is, do you, when you first start, for example, based off of this scenario with blue, what are your initial restrictions that you implement? Is it a minimum number of passes and touches? What do you build off of there?
None, no restrictions. So basically they just play within the grid. So when they're doing the 4v0, it's just basically moving the ball. The keys that we're looking for with that, it's like in here, it's just the shape and movement of the guys. And so, you know, whenever a player has the ball, I want to look at their eyes and make sure their eyes are scanning. You know, the hips always open to the field. And then the speed of the pass and the speed of the ball and the speed of movement, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
There's not really a pass limitation. And even within the possession thing, they say, well, the girls are asking, do we have so many passes to make? I say, heck no, you just keep destroying that kid. And if he can't get the ball, it's his fault. Right. So if it's 20 minutes, which it never is, of them playing 4v1 or 4v2 or whatever, good for them. And so, does that help out?
Yeah. Okay. So it's kind of that's what I was looking at, is kind of essentially kind of a bit of a rondo with some transition built into it. Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. That is exactly right.
Got it.
Thanks, Hector. Anybody else? All right, so we'll kind of go through this little video thing again. I'm so happy I figured this out this week, by the way. All right, so now we're on the next one. So now the next progression. So this is something, so we try to figure out a way to get them to run. So we're still going off the same thought, keeping everything in fours. And the fours I like a lot because you always have that right, left, far away. And then, so 4v4 is big for me, just because you keep that diamond shape in everything that we do, and it works all the way across the field. So next progression is I've got the same field markings, but this time I add a target into one side. So it ends up being, if you look right here, if you see my cursor, on each side you have 3v1. So 3 defenders, 1 attacker. So 3 defenders, 1 attacker on both sides. This 1 attacker ends up being a target player. Okay, so the goal of the 3 is to find the target. And then if you notice on the end, about 2 yards off the field, I put small goals up. I found out, I got this from one of my assistants one time. It was brilliant. I wish I thought of this a long time ago. But by putting it 2 yards behind the field for them to shoot on, that keeps the 3 from puppy guarding, which is another term I never heard of until I got to Dallas. But, you know, people from defenders just stand in front of the goal and become goalkeepers, basically. And so that's why it goes behind here. So whenever the ball's played in, right, then 2 attackers can join into the attack, and I'll kind of show you what the movements are. So that would be an idea. Create a hole, right, fill a hole. And now we create a 3v3 on this side going to this goal right here, if that makes sense. And so to kind of, because Fred's got squishy face, I'm gonna go back with it right quick. That's what feedback's huge. And so once again, the idea is for blue is to score on this goal right here, on this side. So whenever we find that forward open, we're gonna play the ball into him, right? And he's gonna provide drop back to find the shape, because if he's facing backwards, then we'll have the 3rd man combination. Then the other 2 players can join him into the attack. And now we end up with 3v3 to this small goal, okay? So we're looking for making runs. Now the things that we're looking for is with this forward, when they're back in here, and let me kind of back it up to this spot. When they're playing possession, we want these guys each time, when we talked about it from the beginning, is getting their eyes up, looking for the forward. So as they're playing possession, you'll find it once again, most of the time we move into this, they're just going to do like they always have and play a rondo. But we want to get them out of that rondo thinking, we want them thinking going forward and attacking, right? So every time the ball's passed, I say, I want you to find this target. I want you looking for this target. So anytime you don't have the ball, you're finding the target, because we got to find that target as quick as possible. The next thing will happen, I wish I may just pull this thing off where I can move the dots around, but you'll find the target will hang out on this line, right? And so if you guys have played any kind of transition game with this kind of stuff, this guy will stay right here. Well, it's not really conducive to what really happens in the game. So what I tell them is that anytime the ball is being passed around the back, this forward gets away from the line as far as he can. then whenever they look up at them and they have the ball, they'll check into those spaces to create, and that brings them in. And so they're just kind of an example again, kind of shift forward, and then they go on the attack, 3v3. And make sure I've got it, maintain and leave space to fill holes and play the way you face. So that's the biggest thing. This, a lot of times the target will try to turn around. So let me ask you this. There's a key to this thing that actually the beautiful discovery that happens, but it works on the opposite direction too. And can y'all think of a way that working it the other way would happen? Because if we're 3v3 right here, what happens when the defense gets the ball? And can you see
1v1?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so what it'll find is that these defenders, if I do it right, if we create it right, and if they're thinking our first response whenever we win the ball is over here, it's 1v1. Well, if our transition's quick enough, then it becomes 3v1. And so the counterattack, we start developing a counterattack after this as well, going to that small goal. But the idea that we're trying to get into our players is that, once again, that attacking mindset. So looking forward to find, always looking for that attacking player to get the ball, that attacking player, then to maintain shape and shove it down their throat as fast as they can. And I think most of y'all probably seen the studies done that most of the goals in the World Cup were scored off of 3 or less passes. All right, so possession is great, but if you see it quick enough and you can counter fast enough, you can find that player quick enough. And this is not, and by no means is kickball. And you got to understand what we're talking about. There's a difference. It's playing vertical, which means there's a plan. I want to hit this guy's feet. I'm not just kicking the crap out of the ball. But then our runs and support runs and the runs off the ball have to be on it too. And that's what creates the scoring opportunities to get in, if that makes sense.
And the only way that the attackers can enter the other half is if it's passed. They can't carry it in there, correct?
No. Yeah, no, I don't want that happening. You're right. So the whole idea is there's two things. We're training our forwards. Yeah, and we're training the forward to get open too. Because I promise you what'll end up happening is the forward will sit on this line. And so it gives you the opportunity that when the ball's away, and this is what I tell our forwards, when the ball's away and the defense is moving it around, that's the time to start jacking with the defenders. Right? So I tell our forwards that even when the other team's attacking, right, and I've got my 3 guys up top, I say, okay, start moving around. Try to get the defenders to pay attention to you. Because if I can get them looking at my forwards while the ball's not in play to them and start moving around, they're no longer looking to defend and not doing their shape or whatever. And so as soon as we maintain or we get the ball back in, then they jump back into places to where we can now counter fast and get into them. And this is kind of what this is developing. So most of the time, I'll have that one player being the target, the one they're looking for. This is usually going to be a forward that I'm looking to create space through runs, create space or opportunities when the ball's away, when they're not even involved in play. Because I don't know if you guys see the same thing that I do. A lot of my players, and it doesn't matter what level, I think they've been conditioned so long to play 4-on-4 small-sided games that they end up losing vision of the long, all right, the far away. And so a lot of stuff I say is that always look for the longest, safest pass. And we try to condition that into them. Get your eyes up, find that, eliminate numbers, right? Bypass midfield if we can. We find different ways to get in, but it's never kickball. It's not just cramming a ball down the field. It's finding people for a reason. And when their ball's away and those forwards are moving off the ball, all right, the rest of the team knows that's what they're doing. And we've been practicing it. So as soon as they win the ball, their first look, they've been trained to look to find that forward or find a front runner to get the ball to. So then we play off that and counter as fast as we can and try to get in. It did pretty good with goals this year. Any other questions you guys have with this one?
Hey,
Now with the girls tonight, this is not so good. Yeah, Hector, what you got?
I'm assuming you're, since you transitioned from the warm-up to small-sided, but typically your dimension remains the same on these, correct?
Yes, sir. Yeah, now to kind of answer your question too, tonight we had to make it bigger for the girls. You know, and I've had to do it with the guys as well. So with my high school guys, it starts off this, but then, you know, the spacing doesn't work. And so you guys know as well as I do that if it's not working, they're either you got to abandon the drill, which is sometimes I do, or you have to open up space to make it conducive because the space will allow for that greater freedom of movement and ideas. Right. So if it starts off too tight, and I would leave enough space to open that gap up, open the spaces up, to have them understand it. Yeah. All right, and tonight I was limited by time, so we got about 10 minutes of this, and I said, screw this, we'll come back to this next practice. And so the girls, I canceled it. With the guys, we kept it going just because I had the numbers right and I had the spacing right. And really it was not you know, one or the other, just happened to be that day. That's a great question. Anything else you guys see, your thoughts?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Okay, can you can you go back to where it was 3v1? My question
Sure.
is, I think I'm going to have this problem with my girls if I try this. The one red, I guess it would be the blue
Right here.
striker,
This one?
the blue striker waiting for the pass. My girls probably, what's to stop those three from just marking her everywhere? I mean, is there a rule?
That's what you want. No, and that's the beauty of it too. Because then my guys and the girls thought the same thing. But remember, the key is this. When the ball's being passed around here, she's jacking with these three.
Mm-hmm.
If she stands the line and they mark her, she's marked out of the game. But when the ball's being passed around, if she goes, and do you see my cursor by any chance?
Yes.
So what I'll do is I'll tell her to come up here. So if they're going to mark her out, we're going to start running this back line. You know, and do y'all remember Van Nistelrooy, Ruud Van Nistelrooy by any chance? That dude is a Dutch guy a couple years back. He's probably, probably about 30 years younger than Chris Bryant. But he was the king of being offsides, but he was never offsides. So what you do is that if the ball's being passed around, she can be back here. She's in an offside position, but she's not offside. But the key is that look. Whenever this one looks up, one of these the players in the back look up, then she jets into the space she's created, right? If she chooses to stand marked on that line, yeah, then she's taking herself out of the game. And that's what we're trying to train her not to do, right? Just like in a real game, if you play a team that plays marking backs, which doesn't happen often, right? When the ball's not in your player, you cannot see your player. That's the time to start jacking with these or making these defenders move to where you don't want. So you want to mark, and I want them to tighten up on her, all right? Or my guys, I want them to follow him wherever he goes. So he's going to play back here so that when the girl looks up or the guy looks up, then you can jet back into that space and be open. Does that make sense?
Yes. All right.
Yeah, and that's kind of the beauty behind it, because they're going to mark them because 3v1. But that's, I hate to say, it's kind of what you want. And then, but the key is to train that target to move off to make things happen.
And do you call offsides during the drill?
No.
Nope.
I probably should have been. It's crazy, but you want them to get offside.
Yeah, that's what I was asking for. That prevents all three from marking up on.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then you want them you want the attacker to be offsides for sure, and then look up and get back on sides quickly. You know, and then hope you have decent referees when the real game happens. But you know, I want my forwards to kind of play offsides, because that's making that, once again, if I slide behind you as a defender in the middle of a game when it's on the other side of the field, and I can start getting behind you, now you've got to turn your attention to me, who's behind you, so you're no longer looking at play development, if that makes sense. As long as you jump back on sides right when the ball's being passed, you're good to go.
Got it.
So, Warren, the second part I have of this is, do you ever, I know this is, for the purposes of this, your coaching points right now, and I don't want to stray from it, they're kind of attack based and also kind of counterattack based. Yeah. But have you ever turned to this particular activity in terms of it's a good way to probably train and instruct your defenders as well?
Yeah, no, for sure. I never thought about that, but you know, the beauty of all these activities is, you know, you're free to do whatever. But I can see where you could. That'd be interesting. Yeah, it'd be interesting defensive one, especially defending the counter. So I can see where I could use that quite a bit. So no, I agree. No, shoot, that's a great idea. In fact, we may have to do a session on that now. Now you got me thinking. So no, that's brilliant. And that's what I want you to be able to do, is use anything I've got is yours for anything. And then Hector, I'm going to have you bring it back in and tell us how you did it. So I like it. What other questions you guys have? I appreciate you guys' feedback, because it makes it so much easier to do this. All right, so now we take on to the next one.
Sorry about you, Warren. If we can let Eric.
Oh, sorry.
You're good.
Oh yeah, I'll get Eric in.
Is there a minimum number of passes before they play to the forward?
No, you could. I mean, my thought has always been, I try to, you know, there's times when I do limit passes, but I'm telling you right now, most of the time it's unlimited, because the thing you want to do is, if they start passing around all the time and trying to possess all the time, I'll say, hey, hold on a second. Remember, that's showing you they're lacking the vision to see the front runner, right? I don't really want to possess. I'm getting out of doing the number of passes before going forward stuff, because it's not conducive to quick play. Because most of their time when they're trained in their clubs, whatever, they're spending a lot of time on possession. And so we have a possession-based team that never ever sees the point, which is get forward and score goals. and then, like I said, maybe one of these days we'll do the defensive side where I show you how to break it down and press into pockets. And there's ways that we counter all this stuff too.
So Warren, with there not being a minimum, if they can just one touch it up there, that's gold, right?
Heck yeah, no, that's beautiful. Yeah, if you're that quick, then that's huge. That's what we want. I want them to find the quick get forward. And my whole philosophy on this has changed. I mean, heck, with pretty soccer, if I can get in and get behind you as quick as possible with a purpose, then let's go. Now once again, I'm going to refrain from, or hopefully not lead this on to being kickball. It's not blasting a ball, right? There's no reason. If I kick a ball out and give another team the ball, this is for a purpose. Everything has a reason. And any long ball has to go to somebody and create something. Otherwise, that's when we start our coaching points. That's a good point, Fred. Thanks, Brian. All right, anything else that you guys see or thoughts before I move to the next one? Okay, so the next progression is now we've got to bring in the team, because one of the big problems that I have is that when we play small-sided a lot, that we end up losing the whole team. So, for example, tonight, even with the high school guys the other days when we did this, when we first started doing it, you'll find out that, well, let me back up and just kind of tell you the just behind this. This is the same old divide the field into 3 zones, right? And so usually, depending on the number of players I have, try to keep everybody involved. But in the end, it can be any variation as possible, all right? So today, for tonight, for example, I had enough for have 4 defenders and 3 attackers in this zone. Okay, so
full field, Warren. Sorry.
This one today we did it in probably 70 yards.
Okay.
In a 70-yard field, so it kind of depends on what you have too. All right, so it could be full field, but I really try to stray away from that, because really when the game's played, the teams really should only be about 50 to 60 from top to bottom anyway. When you keep it compressed and keep it tight, both in attack and defense. So it's usually about 70 yards. I think I've done this inside our pack, which is about 70 yards long, and that's about as long as it gets. But it's divided into thirds where you've got a midfield section, you've got an attacking section. So, for example, this would be red attackers, even numbers in midfield, red defenders, and a red goalkeeper, because we're going to now incorporate the goalkeeper as much as possible in everything that we do, because they're a key part of this thing. For tonight, when I did it with our ODP girls, then we put 4 girls back here and 3 attackers that work good, because now the forwards have to move. They have to move and they have to open up spaces, because they were playing, and when I yell at them, I say, this is boring, because they'll play 3 flat in the deal. You've got your center forward and you got your 2 wingers, or if we do the new soccer lingo, we got our 7, 11, and 9, and they're just standing up there in those same areas. They don't move, right? So you got your target and the 2 wides, and it's so easy to defend. And so this allows me now to start working and playing off each other. All right, with 3, a lot of times I'll mark, which it makes it a little easier to move, but it just works off that. Then we've got even numbers, and then the attack is the exact opposite. And the whole idea is here. I think I got all this in. So as the ball goes wide, from the center back to the wide back, and I want you to kind of think about how we could create space. Now, let me back up more time too. For the first round, everybody has to stay in their little zone. Nobody can get out of their little zone, and there's a reason for it. So now, how would it look? Okay, so if you're looking at the forwards, as the ball plays here to here, most of the time, especially in the beginning rounds, these kids in the front are not going to move, because they automatically think that because the ball is passing and it's not in their little zone, that they're free from doing anything. Just like in your soccer games, right? Your team gets the ball. How many times do you look up and the kids that are within 30, 40 yards or beyond that are not moving, right? But then that's the time to create space and have things happen. And that's what this zone thing is, because they're going to do it. And I promise you, when you put it in, everybody's going to be standing still, even the midfielders. But then we go back to the very beginning, right? Every time a player has a ball, they must have a right, left, and far away option. And this happens across the field with every single player. I'm telling you right now, this outside or this left forward, right, has to be moving, has to be creating something. The other outside back has to be creating. The goalkeeper has to be providing shape. The center midfielders have to be moving. Everybody's got to move. And this will allow you to do it within the 3 zones. The ball goes out wide. Now, this is kind of weird. Why in the heck would this forward check in like this, right? Sometimes it's okay, right? It comes in. Maybe they're putting this option. But if you think about it, sometimes you make a run just to create something totally different. So now we've got this player pop up out of nowhere, right? Now we can bypass it and go all the way in. So once again, see how I've got it all moving in. So ball checks in, player comes near, and then player goes out wide. And now we've got the ball that comes in here, okay? So that by knowing that these girls or guys constantly moving the balls down here, doing the stuff we talked about in the 1v3 situation. Now they're doing it for a reason. Now they're making runs to create off it. Also, I've seen it where you have your 9 check back in. When the 9 checks back in, the 7-11 or the wingers now start making runs off that. And it all goes back to the very beginning with that 4v4 and that small grid. That's awesome, Brian. You just made my day, man. So there we go. It works around in place, but the whole idea is here. Now the progression is, right? Now this gets boring pretty quick. The next progression is I say, okay, now forwards can now check into the midfield zone. And that's kind of what we want. We want one of these guys checking in to create space in behind for players to run in behind, right? Or we say now when the ball goes forward, an outside back can go with them, right? So we start mushing up other players into the next zone. Or anytime I play into a zone, 2 players can follow into that next zone. And the beauty of it is when you start doing pluses or kids coming out of one zone playing into the other, then you're also creating the counterattack opportunities for when you win the ball. So kind of, I'll go ahead, Trey.
Can the defender follow if forward comes in or no?
I would say no, just because if that defender follows, then they're going the same track of the ball. I like to keep them there, but I'd rather if the ball goes in, then this defender on the far side now starts making their run. That's kind of great. For sure, I mean, they can play it in and overlap in. That's 100% okay, right? And then you can also talk about how the rest of the team shifts this stuff or recover to it. No, that might be a bad idea. I think I like that, Fred. Yeah, so play the forward, then overlap in, for sure. Now, especially in today's game when you've got the 2 and the 3 making the attacking runs, they're the outside backs making runs in. This also helps develop that as well. All right, so any questions on that?
So Warren, I'm kind of curious because I've run something very similar to this in the past, and especially last year with my new group of girls. I'm kind of curious, do you find that you end up, especially when you go kind of full-sided like this, do you end up, after a while, when it starts going in transition back and forth, do you end up with a lot of overloads on one side where you have to stress the switching the point of attack and then the support runs that go with that? Because for me, I found, particularly last year, since I was with a new group, I found myself having to do that a lot. And one of the key coaching points that came out of that it took us a long time for us to really get it, was getting them to understand that the run comes before the pass, right?
Okay.
And oftentimes they would not release to make that final supporting run until the pass was already released. So I'm just kind of curious as far as the switching the point of attack, if you end up coming across where you have one side you end up finding where a good amount of the action is on one side and you find yourself having to stress switching the point of attack.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? You did it better than I could have said. Because guess what I dealt with tonight when I first introduced this to our 05, and this is the 05 ODP girls. So this is some of the top girls in the state of Texas, right? In the 05 age group, so that makes them sophomores. You know what I was looking at today? They were playing on one side of the field and not switching the point of attack. So you're 100% correct. But it goes back to what we talked about in the very beginning, right? So the first thing is the right, left, far away option. Second thing is your hips open to the field. So when they're playing one side, I'd encourage you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I would almost guarantee that your 2 central midfielders or any player in the middle of the field is facing that direction. All right, So if this ball was coming forward, if I look at this girl's hips, I promise you she's facing that direction without ever opening her hips to the field and checking the shoulder. One way I would counter that, and this probably we'll do next time, is that when the ball plays forward, this defender can't go. It has to be the far side defender that goes. Right. Or, an outside mid, any run has to be made on the opposite side of the field. And then we also, I've got different stuff that we can use, and maybe we'll bring it up on a future one on switching the point of attack. There's a really good drill I saw, or an activity I saw with the women's national team one time that is unbelievable. And I can draw it up pretty quick, but you basically take 2 wide goals. So you'd have a 4-goal game, if that makes sense. So you have 2 attacking goals and you're defending 2 goals, but they're placed on the wide. So on the field, it'd be outside the football numbers on a field.
Right.
And then you have a center channel is probably 20 yards wide. And this field's no long more than like 30 yards long, if that makes sense. And we play a 4v4 type of flying changes. I don't know if that makes sense, where, if you score, you knock off a team, next one comes on.
Yeah.
The rules are inside the middle channel, it's 1 touch. Outside, max 3 touches. Hold on a second. Let me mute this for a second. Sorry about that. My daughter's screaming. Hey, so anyway, it's 1 touch in the middle. And so what that does is that now we encourage them to look the far side. So as the ball comes in, they don't have a lot of time to think about it. They've already had to open their hips. And so it may be even like a 2-touch limitation in the middle, but then you're encouraging them to go wide on the far side. And then I always talk about numbers, look at the numbers. Are we putting numbers in or numbers up, numbers down? So before you ever receive the ball, hips open, look on the far side. And then we also call it reading flow, but you're watching the runners as they're running across to counter the movement. So maybe do a session later with that.
Okay.
Does that help out or not really? But I promise you, I see the same things. It doesn't matter what level you're on, no matter what team you have, right? When they did the PDL, and Chris could attest to this, the PDL boys were doing the same things that my high school guys were doing. It doesn't matter what level, they're still have to learn the game and learn to switch the point, like you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, that was probably the biggest one that I found. And that, or in this, based off your makeup here, for example, if we were looking at the red team going forward, and your 7, 9 and 11 in the attacking third, what I often found too was, because it's so right what you were talking about in the first part with hips being open where you can see the field, and often I would have like my my wingers, my 7 and 11, they would, and my 9, all with their back to the goal, all working into the same space, cutting each other off.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, and the beauty of it is it's a simple solution, because you can just go back to the eyes. I hate to say, now I've started coaching football, they make such a big deal about watch your eyes and get your eyes right. I hate to say it transfers over to soccer.
Mm-hmm.
Get your eyes right. What are you staring at? And so if they're making the same runs, I promise they're all looking at the ball, right? If their hips are close to the play, I promise they're staring at the ball. And so the whole idea is to be like Iniesta, get your eyes up, get your hips open. Iniesta scans the field all the time, always looking for things. One thing I've done with some of the younger ones is say, okay, I want you to watch the next professional game. Your job is to watch the eyes of the players, not on the ball. And you can see the pros do it all the time. You can see their heads looking up, and they're constantly scanning and thinking what the next play is. And that's why they play faster, because their ideas are built, right? Their hips are set right, their eyes are up, and then their ideas come as a result.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Hector. Man, I appreciate you. You're a rock star tonight. What are the questions you guys have? Okay, so now to move on, the last thing is we just take away the restrictions and we play the game. And so I would, for like tonight, in a 2-hour session, this is probably 40 minutes of the session, was taking it now. Can we take it from the very beginning? The open your hips, the right, left, far away, the scanning the field, all the things we've talked about. Now we're going to take it straight up into the 11-a-side game. Probably should have done a better job putting the dots where they belong, but that's the idea, is to take it always in and let them play. At this point in time, there shouldn't be a ton of coaching is. We try to coach from the flow, but mostly letting the kids figure it out. And it's weird because every time you progress from one station to the next station, they always go back to bad habits, but hopefully you start seeing the creativity and they start applying it to the game. And so for myself, when I've done like a total different, I wish I'd known this stuff when I first started coaching, but it always goes back to that left back, getting used to playing a left back in their position. And so get them quick as possible into their game positions and their situations they'll see in the field, and get them playing is the key. And I'll kind of give a tag for the new U.S. soccer licensing that we're going to have in the TASCO clinic. I strongly encourage you to join in on that, especially the practice play modules that we're going over now. It really helps develop and lead into this kind of stuff, to where, getting kids playing where they're used to playing, where they constantly play the position they're going to play with the players that they're going to play with. It develops a whole lot faster, and they see the game a whole lot quicker, and they're making the judgments a whole lot quicker. And that's kind of the session we have. With that, I'll open up any questions. That's from the beginning to the end, and that's one of the things I found that's been unbelievably successful for us at Colleyville Heritage. Like I said, our goals scoring went through the roof. We had one kid at 27 goals, but he was also the assist leader on the team. And so, you know, it's not, they were averaging like 4-0 or on teams. It was just this idea of the movement off the ball, the right, left, far away, the providing shape, and then the counter runs. You know, and then it's hard to score on a team that's putting you under pressure all the time. So defending as a result. But, you know, one of these future sessions when we have somebody else drop off the last minute, maybe we'll do a defensive session if y'all want to see it. All right. With that being said, hey, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate your attention. Any other questions you have? Once again, this is all for y'all. If there's anything you liked or anything you want to add, I want to open that up too, because like I said, you guys have all seen it all, and I sure appreciate, you know, Brian, Hector, and Daniel, you guys jumping in, and Fred adding input and ideas. Chris, you got anything to add to it? Because you had to deal with me more than anybody.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you're talking about that, you know, is the speed of play of getting forward as fast as you can, because the ultimate goal is score goals. I mean, that's the goal. And the fact is that, you know, I called Warren over this last year. We played a team and we beat them 8-0. They outpossessed me, but we still beat them 8-0. And the reason was because we were trying to play that ball quickly into their defensive third, and we were scoring goals left and right as we were doing that. And so really, when you look at it, I think that's one of the big things, you know, and when Warren and I were doing PDL, we were trying to push this through with our team. And the big thing to make sure that you understand is it's not kickball. It's finding that ball forward for a purpose as we go through that. So again, I just wanted to stress that as we go through that. So.
Chris, that's a great defensive segue too, because if you think about it, I almost guarantee I know where their possession was. You know, where they're possessing in their half of the field, weren't they?
Yeah, definitely. It was that what I saw was within the midfield, but it was more of in their back third of the midfield. So
yeah, good for them.
Yeah, it helped me out. So.
Yeah, so that's true. But then it kind of goes back to the same thing in the first game when those three kids are passing the ball around the one. You know, you can do that all day long, but it doesn't really make a difference. Thanks, Chris. No, it's perfect.
I'd like to chime in there to something Fred said last week about the packing stat. I've been thinking about that all week long. Just about how this applies to that. Everything that I've done this last week, it was with that concept in mind and introducing it to the guys on Monday, and they'd never thought of it in that sense, but it was because we've always been a possession style team. I mean, that's right. That's one of the biggest stats we look at the day after the game. And so I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I work that into the session? And I really like this session here, that I think it's going to be able to, not only are we getting open, are we making the backside runs, but how are we getting past people? Are we just possessing to possess? Or are we trying to get it forward to get down there in the offensive third?
And that gets back into what Chris just said too, is fine. You can possess all day in that defensive third if you want to. We're still going to beat you 8-0.
Yeah. No.
I don't get that chance very often, but yeah.
Oh, me.
You know, I was gonna piggyback exactly on what I know Fred just alluded to it, but what Chris just mentioned about the 8 goals. So we've noticed that kind of similar to that recent that Aston Villa thumping of Liverpool, right? The 7-2, mm-hmm. where Liverpool had, I think, almost 80% of possession, right? So. And I think that's something that's in the COVID world that we're in now. Hopefully, you know, if and when we get to play, the limited training that we're going to kind of get, I think something like this is going to be very important. Something that we went over tonight, because you're going to definitely have far less training time. So I think it's going to be, you know, there's possession and then there's purposeful possession. So yeah, that's a great point.
Well, Warren, thank you so much for coming on tonight and filling in at the last minute. This is definitely something I'll be stealing from you, and I'll be putting together this week, and we'll let you know how it goes. But I also like the idea that other folks brought up too, with turning some of those into defensive practices as well on defending a transition too. So it'll be interesting to hear what we get back from that going forward on that too. But Well,
Yeah, no,
Warren,
for
thank you. Yeah, thank you again, Warren. I really do appreciate it, and I'm glad we're having people back out. That makes my job easier. I can steal from people who I know.
Yeah, no kidding. No, it was awesome, and thanks for everybody jumping in.